The orc woman standing at the edge of the corral had watched Boone Zarrow fight that black stallion for 3 days straight, and on the morning of the 4th, she decided she had seen enough. Her name was Brenna Graystone, and she was 37 years old, which in the small frontier town of Copper Ridge made her the subject of endless speculation and pity. The human women her age had married at 16 or 18, raised children who were nearly grown, settled into the comfortable rhythm of middle life with husbands and homes and gardens. The orc women who lived in the scattered settlements beyond town had done much the same, pairing off young with warriors or farmers of their own kind. Brena had done neither. She lived alone in a small cabin at the far end of town, took odd jobs mending fences or hauling supplies, and kept mostly to herself. The town had long since decided she was too strange, too quiet, too old, and far too orcish for any decent man to consider. The fact that she had never shown interest in marriage only confirmed their suspicions that something was fundamentally wrong with her. She had green skin the color of summer moss, small tusks that curved just past her lower lip when she smiled, which was rare, and pointed ears that she kept hidden beneath a worn leather hat most days. She was tall but not towering, lean and strong in the way of someone who worked hard and ate sparingly, with hands that were scarred and capable. She dressed in men's work clothes because they lasted longer, and nobody made dresses for orc women in Copper Ridge anyway. The local children sometimes pointed and whispered when she passed. The adults were more subtle, but their disapproval hung in the air like smoke. Brena had learned to ignore most of it. She had her cabin, her work, and a small vegetable garden that gave her something to tend when the loneliness grew too sharp. She told herself it was enough. She told herself she did not need the things other women had. She told herself a great many lies, and on most days she almost believed them. But then, Boone Zarrow had bought the old Patterson ranch 6 months ago, and everything had become harder. He was a man in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of slate. He had come from somewhere back east, arrived with a wagon full of tools and a pocket full of dreams, and set about turning the failing ranch into something profitable. He was kind to everyone, tipped his hat to the women in town, paid his bills on time, and worked harder than any 3 men combined. Within a month, the entire female population of Copper Ridge had decided he was the finest thing to ever set foot in their dusty little town. Within 2 months, half of them were scheming to marry him off to their daughters or nieces or sisters. Brena had noticed him the first week he arrived. She had been hauling lumber for the general store when he stopped to help her load a particularly heavy beam, his smile easy and warm, his hands strong and sure. He had introduced himself, asked her name, treated her like a person rather than a curiosity. It was such a small thing, such a simple kindness, and it had cracked something open inside her chest that she had thought sealed shut years ago. She had fallen for him quietly, helplessly, the way a stone falls into a well. She knew it was foolish. She knew nothing could come of it. But she could not seem to stop herself from watching him when he came to town, from listening when people spoke of him, from letting herself imagine impossible things in the dark hours before dawn. And now he was in trouble, and nobody seemed to notice but her. The black stallion had arrived at the ranch a week ago, sold to Boone by a traveling horse trader who had sworn the animal was spirited but trainable. The truth was that the horse was half wild and wholly vicious, a beautiful nightmare of muscle and rage that had already injured 2 ranch hands and destroyed a section of fence. Boone had taken over the training himself, determined to break the stallion or be broken trying, and for 3 days Brenna had watched him exhaust himself in the corral while the horse fought him every step of the way. It was going to end badly. She could see it in the set of Boone's shoulders, the stubborn line of his jaw, the way he pushed himself long past the point of sense. He was a proud man, she had learned. Too proud to admit when something was beyond him, too proud to ask for help. And that pride was going to get him killed if someone did not intervene. So on the 4th morning, when the town was still quiet and the sun barely over the horizon, Brenna walked onto the Zarrow ranch and let herself into the corral. Boone was already there, standing in the center of the pen with a lead rope in his hands and exhaustion written across his face. The stallion was at the far end, black coat gleaming, eyes rolling white, every line of his body screaming defiance. He was a magnificent animal, all power and fury, and he wanted nothing to do with the man trying to tame him. Boone turned when he heard the gate creak, surprise flickering across his features when he saw Brenna. "Miss Graystone," he said, his voice rough from shouting commands at the horse. "This is not a good time." "I can see that," Brenna said. She closed the gate behind her and stood still, letting the stallion take her measure. The horse's ears flicked toward her, nostrils flaring. "I mean it," Boone said, a hint of irritation creeping into his tone. "This animal is dangerous. I cannot be responsible if you get hurt." "Then do not be responsible," Brenna said. She took a slow step forward, her eyes on the horse rather than the man. "Give me the rope." Boone stared at her. "What, the rope?" she repeated. "Give it to me and step back." He hesitated, clearly torn between concern and offense. "Miss Graystone, I appreciate the offer, but I have been working with horses my entire life." "I do not need—" "You need something," Brenna interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. "Because what you are doing is not working, and that horse is going to hurt you if you keep pushing." Boone's jaw tightened. She saw the flash of wounded pride in his eyes, the instinct to refuse to prove himself. But he also saw something else, something that surprised her. He saw that she was serious, that she was not mocking him or doubting his skill. She was simply stating a fact. He handed her the rope. Brenna took it and waited until Boone had stepped back to the fence before she turned her full attention to the stallion. The horse watched her with wild, wary eyes, muscles bunched and ready to bolt or strike. He was terrified, she realized. Beneath all that rage was a deep, bone-shaking fear. Someone had hurt this animal badly, and he had learned that humans meant pain. She understood that. She understood it better than most. She did not move toward him. Instead, she stood in the center of the corral and let the rope hang loose in her hand. She breathed slowly, evenly, and waited. Minutes passed. The sun climbed higher, warming the air. The stallion shifted his weight, snorted, pawed at the ground. Brenna did not react. She simply existed in the same space as the horse, patient and still, a presence without threat. Slowly, so slowly that Boone might not have noticed if he had not been watching so closely, the stallion's ears swiveled forward. His breathing slowed. The rigid tension in his frame eased by a fraction. Brenna took a single step to the side, angling herself so she was not facing him directly, making herself smaller, less confrontational. The horse's head lowered an inch. She waited another 5 minutes, then took another step, then another. Each movement was slow and deliberate, giving the stallion time to understand that she was not going to chase him, not going to force him, not going to hurt him. She was simply there, steady and calm, a constant in the chaos of his fear. It took nearly an hour, but eventually the stallion took a step toward her. Then another. His nostrils flared as he scented the air, trying to understand this strange green-skinned creature who moved like water and smelled of earth and growing things. Brenna extended her hand, palm up, fingers relaxed. The horse stretched his neck, lips pulling back from his teeth, and then, carefully, touched his nose to her palm. Brena exhaled softly. She let him explore her hand, her arm, the sleeve of her shirt. She murmured low words in the orcish tongue, sounds that had no meaning but carried weight and warmth. The stallion's eyes softened. His ears relaxed. When she finally reached up to touch his neck, he did not pull away. Behind her, she heard Boone let out a breath he must have been holding for the last 10 minutes. It took another hour to get the halter on the stallion, and another after that to walk him calmly around the corral. By the time Brena finally led the horse back to Boone and handed him the rope, the sun was high overhead and sweat dampened her shirt. The stallion stood quietly now, head low, eyes half closed, all the fight gone out of him. Boone took the rope with a look of stunned disbelief. "How did you do that?" Brena shrugged, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. "I did not do anything. I just let him decide I was not a threat." "You did a hell of a lot more than that," Boone said. He looked at the horse, then back at Brena, and something shifted in his expression. Something that made her heart beat faster. "I have never seen anything like it. It was like you spoke his language." "Maybe I did," Brena said. She ducked her head, hiding behind the brim of her hat. "Animals do not care if you are human or orc. They only care if you are safe." Boone was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her want to flee. Then he said, "I need someone like you on this ranch." Brena's head snapped up. "What?" "I mean it," Boone said. He gestured to the stallion, to the other horses in the pasture beyond. "I've got a dozen animals that need training, and I am in over my head. I thought I could handle it myself, but clearly I was wrong." The admission seemed to cost him, but he pressed on. "If you can do with the rest of them what you just did with this one, you would be worth your weight in gold. I can pay you, not a lot but fair wages, and you would have free run of the ranch." Brena stared at him, her mind racing. Work on the ranch, see him every day. Be close to the man she had been trying so hard not to want. It was a terrible idea. It would only make everything harder when nothing came of it. When he inevitably married one of the pretty human girls in town and Brena was left alone again. But the hope in his eyes, the way he looked at her like she was capable of something extraordinary, like she mattered, she could not bring herself to refuse. "All right," she said quietly. "I will do it." Boone's face broke into a smile that could have lit the whole territory. "Thank you, Miss Graystone. You have no idea how much this means to me." She thought she might have some idea, but she only nodded and turned away before he could see the way her hands trembled. The next weeks unfolded in a pattern that became as familiar as breathing. Brena arrived at the ranch each morning just after dawn, worked with the horses until the light began to fail, and then walked the long road back to her cabin in the gathering dark. Boone paid her every Friday, counting out the coins with careful precision, always adding a little extra that she suspected he could not afford. She did not argue. She took the money and put it in a tin under her floorboards, and tried not to think about how quickly she was falling deeper into something she could not have. The horses responded to her in ways that defied explanation. The skittish mare that bolted at shadows learned to trust her touch within days. The aging gelding with a mean streak became gentle under her guidance. The young colt that refused to be saddled stood calm and patient while she worked the leather straps across his back. Word began to spread through the territory that the Zarrow ranch had an orc woman who could tame anything with 4 legs, and people came from miles around to see if the rumors were true. They were. Brena worked miracles in that corral, and every horse she trained sold for twice what Boone had expected. Money began to flow into the ranch's coffers, enough to repair the barn roof and buy feed for the winter, and hire back one of the hands who had quit after the black stallion injured him. The town's mockery began to shift slowly into something that resembled respect. People still whispered when Brenna walked past, but now they whispered about her skill rather than her strangeness. It was not acceptance, not quite, but it was closer than she had ever come. And through it all, she and Boone grew close in the way of people who work side by side toward a common goal. He learned that she preferred to work in silence, but appreciated when he brought her water on hot afternoons. She learned that he rose before dawn every day, and often did not stop working until long after dark, pushing himself with a relentless drive that worried her. They shared meals sometimes, simple things like bread and cheese eaten on the porch while the sun set, and he told her stories about growing up on a farm in Pennsylvania, about the dream he had of building something lasting here in the West. He never mentioned money troubles, and Brenna did not ask. But she noticed things. The way he winced when the supply bills came due. The way he sometimes skipped meals, claiming he was not hungry when she suspected he was just stretching the food stores. The tension that crept into his shoulders whenever someone mentioned the bank in town. She began to suspect that the ranch was not doing as well as it appeared. That the money from the horse sales was going to pay off debts rather than build the future Boone spoke of so passionately. But he never said a word, and his pride was such a tangible thing that she did not know how to broach the subject without wounding him. So she kept working, kept gentling horses, kept pretending that her heart did not ache every time he smiled at her. It was in the early autumn, when the leaves on the cottonwoods turned gold and the air grew crisp with the promise of winter, that things began to unravel. Brena was in the corral with a dappled gray mare when she heard raised voices coming from the ranch house. She paused, one hand on the mare's neck, and listened. Boone's voice, low and defensive. Another man's voice, sharp and insistent. She could not make out the words, but the tone was clear enough. An argument. A serious one. The mare shifted nervously, picking up on Brenna's sudden tension. She soothed the horse with a murmur and continued working, but her attention was split, half on the animal and half on the voices that rose and fell like a distant storm. 10 minutes later, a man in a fine suit and polished boots emerged from the house and stalked toward a carriage waiting by the front gate. He did not look at Brenna as he passed, but she saw the cold satisfaction on his face and felt a chill run down her spine. Boone stood on the porch, shoulders rigid, hands clenched at his sides. Even from a distance she could see the defeat in the set of his jaw. She finished with the mare and put her in the paddock, then crossed the yard to where Boone still stood. He did not seem to notice her approach until she was standing at the base of the porch steps. "Who was that?" she asked quietly. Boone jerked, as if pulled from some dark reverie. "No one, just a man from town." "He did not look like no one," Brenna said. She climbed the steps and stood beside him, studying his face. "What did he want?" "It does not matter," Boone said. His voice was tight, controlled. "It is handled." "Boone," Brenna said. She did not reach for him, did not touch him, but she let her concern show in her eyes. "What is going on?" For a long moment she thought he would not answer. Then he let out a breath and seemed to deflate, the rigid pride crumbling just enough for her to see the fear beneath. "That was Gerald Pritchard. He works for the bank. They hold the note on the ranch." Brenna's stomach dropped. "How much do you owe?" Boone hesitated, then named a sum that made her knees weak. It was more than she had expected, far more than the ranch could hope to pay off in a season or even two. "I thought the horse sales were bringing in good money," she said carefully. "They are," Boone said. "But it is not enough. The previous owner left more debts than I realized when I bought the place, and I have been scrambling to cover them ever since. I thought I could manage it, thought if I just worked hard enough and sold enough horses, I could dig myself out. But Pritchard says the bank is losing patience. They want the full balance by the end of the year or they are going to foreclose. End of the year, Brenna repeated. That was less than 3 months away. Can you raise it? Not at the rate things are going, Boone admitted. He scrubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion etched into every line. I have been selling horses as fast as you can train them, but it is not enough, and I cannot train them any faster without risking their quality, which means they will not fetch the prices we need. Why did you not say something sooner? Brenna asked, frustration creeping into her voice. I could have what? Boone snapped. He turned to face her, his eyes blazing. This is my problem, Miss Graystone. My ranch, my debt, my failure. I will not drag you into it. I am already in it, Brenna shot back. I work here. I have a stake in this place too, even if my name is not on the deed. You think I want to see everything we have built together sold off to the highest bidder? Boone said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. This is not your fight. Then whose fight is it? Brenna demanded. Yours alone. You are so determined to carry everything by yourself that you cannot see when someone is trying to help you. I do not need help, Boone said, and even as the words left his mouth, Brenna could see he did not believe them. I can figure this out. By doing what? Brenna asked. Working yourself to death, pretending everything is fine until the bank comes to take the land. That is not a plan, Boone. That is pride talking, and pride is going to cost you everything. Boone flinched as if she had struck him. For a moment she thought he would lash out, defend himself, push her away. Instead he turned and gripped the porch railing, his knuckles white. What would you have me do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Beg. Admit that I am not good enough to make this work. I would have you trust me, Brenna said. She moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, close enough that if she reached out she could touch his shoulder. I would have you let someone stand beside you instead of insisting you face everything alone. Boone was silent for a long time. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, he said, I do not know how. Brenna's heart broke a little at the admission. She understood that too. The bone-deep certainty that you had to rely only on yourself because no one else would be there when you needed them. The fear of being vulnerable, of letting someone see your weakness and having them use it against you. She had lived with that fear her entire life. But she was tired of being afraid, and she was tired of watching Boone destroy himself rather than ask for the help he so clearly needed. Let me help you, she said. She did reach out then, laid her hand gently on his arm. He stiffened but did not pull away. Tell me how much you need and we will figure it out together. Boone looked down at her hand, then at her face. Why? He asked. Why would you do that for me? Because I love you, Brenna thought. Because you are the first person in years to look at me like I matter. Because the thought of losing you is more painful than anything I have felt in a long, long time. But she could not say any of that. So instead she said, because this ranch matters to me, and so do you. Something flickered in Boone's eyes, something that looked almost like hope. Then he shook his head and stepped back, breaking the contact between them. I cannot take your money, Miss Graystone. It would not be right. Why not? Brenna asked. Because you have earned every cent working in that corral, and I will not take it to cover my mistakes, Boone said firmly. I got myself into this mess. I will get myself out. Brenna wanted to argue, wanted to shake him until he saw sense, but she could see the set of his jaw and knew he would not budge. Not today. Maybe not ever. His pride was too deeply rooted, too much a part of who he was, so she let it go. For now. But that night, alone in her cabin, she pulled the tin from beneath the floorboards and counted the money she had saved. It was not enough to cover Boone's debt, not even close, but it was more than she had expected. She had been careful, frugal, putting away nearly every coin he paid her, because she had nowhere to spend it and no reason to indulge. She had thought, vaguely, that she might use it someday to buy a piece of land of her own, a place where she could keep a few animals and live without the weight of the town's judgment pressing down on her. But that dream felt distant and insubstantial compared to the very real possibility of losing the ranch, of losing Boone. She sat on the floor with the money spread before her and made a decision. The next morning she went into town and visited the bank. Gerald Pritchard was a thin man with a narrow face and eyes like chips of ice. He looked up from his desk when Brena entered, and his expression shifted from mild curiosity to open disdain when he recognized her. "Miss Graystone," he said, his tone making her name sound like an insult. "What can I do for you?" "I want to know about the loan on the Zarrow ranch," Brena said. She kept her voice level, her chin up. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort. Pritchard's eyebrows rose. "That is between the bank and Mr. Zarrow. It is none of your concern." "I work for Mr. Zarrow," Brena said. "Which makes it my concern. How much does he owe, and what would it take to satisfy the debt?" Pritchard leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Even if I were inclined to discuss a client's private financial matters with a ranch hand, which I am not, I doubt you have the resources to make a difference. This is not a small debt, Miss Graystone." "I know," Brena said. "Tell me the number." Pritchard studied her for a moment, clearly trying to decide if she was serious. Then he pulled a ledger from his desk and flipped through the pages. "The outstanding balance, including interest, is $3,200, due in full by December 31st. Does that satisfy your curiosity? $3,200. Brena's stomach churned. It was even worse than she had feared. She had $800 in her tin, a fortune by her standards but a pittance against that kind of debt. "What if I made a payment toward it?" she asked. "Would that buy more time?" Pritchard laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "A payment from you? What did you do, rob a stage coach?" "I have been saving my wages," Brena said, her voice cold. "I can put down $800 today if it will extend the deadline." The laughter died. Pritchard looked at her with something like surprise, then suspicion. $800? You are serious?" "Yes," Brena said. Pritchard tapped his fingers on the desk, considering. 800 would reduce the balance, certainly, but it would not change the terms. "The bank has been more than patient with Mr. Zarrow. We want this matter settled." "Then take my money and give him until spring," Brena said. "That is 4 more months to raise the rest. With the right horses he can do it." "And if he cannot?" Pritchard asked. "Then you foreclose in the spring instead of the winter," Brena said. "Either way the bank gets its money, but this way you do not look like you are throwing a war veteran out into the snow." Pritchard's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Zarrow was in the war." "He does not talk about it much," Brena said. It was not quite a lie. Boone had mentioned once in passing that he had served in the territorial militia during the conflicts with the northern clans. She did not know the details, but she knew it was true. But people in town remember. "If you foreclose on a veteran right before Christmas, it will not sit well." Pritchard was silent for a long moment, his fingers still drumming on the desk. Then he nodded slowly. "Very well. Bring me the $800 and I will extend the deadline until March 31st. "But that is the final extension, Miss Graystone. If the balance is not paid in full by then, the bank will take possession of the property. No exceptions." "Agreed," Brena said. She left the bank before he could change his mind, her heart pounding. She returned to the ranch that afternoon with the deposit receipt in her pocket and a knot of dread in her stomach. She had bought Boone time, but she had also gone behind his back, used money he had explicitly told her not to spend, and made a decision that affected his future without consulting him. He was going to be furious. She found him in the barn, mucking out stalls. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting with a smile that made her chest ache. "There you are," he said. "I was beginning to think you had decided to take the day off." "I had an errand in town," Brena said. She hesitated, then pulled the receipt from her pocket and held it out. "I need to tell you something." Boone took the receipt, his brow furrowing as he read it. She watched the confusion on his face shift to comprehension, then to something darker. "What is this?" he asked, his voice very quiet. "I went to the bank," Brena said. "I made a payment on your loan. $800. Pritchard agreed to extend the deadline until the end of March. Boone stared at her. "You did what?" "I bought you more time," Brena said. She kept her voice calm, steady, even though her hands were shaking. 4 more months to raise the rest of the money. That is enough for a full season of training and sales. We can do it, Boone. We can save the ranch. Boone repeated. His voice was rising now, edged with anger. "I told you not to do this. I told you I did not want your money." "And I did not listen," Brena said. "Because you are too proud to accept help even when you are drowning." "That was not your decision to make," Boone snapped. He crumpled the receipt in his fist, his face flushed. "That was my debt, my responsibility. You had no right to interfere." "I had every right," Brena shot back. "I work here. I have put months of my life into this ranch. I'm not going to stand by and watch it fail because you are too stubborn to let anyone help you." "This is not about stubborn," Boone said. "This is about you overstepping. You are a ranch hand, Miss Graystone, not my partner. You do not get to make financial decisions on my behalf." The words hit like a physical blow. Brena took a step back, her throat tight. "A ranch hand," she repeated. "Is that all I am to you?" Boone's expression flickered, something like regret crossing his face, but he did not take the words back. "I appreciate everything you have done," he said stiffly, "but this does not change the fact that you overstepped." Brena felt something inside her crack. She had known this was a risk, had known he might react badly, but she had not expected it to hurt this much. She had thought foolishly that he might see her actions as what they were, a desperate attempt to save something she cared about, to save him, but all he saw was a challenge to his pride. "Fine," she said quietly. "If that is how you feel, then I will go. You clearly do not need me here." She turned and walked out of the barn before he could respond, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. She heard him call her name, heard his footsteps behind her, but she did not stop. She crossed the yard, passed through the gate, and started down the long road back to town. He did not follow. Brena spent the next 3 days in her cabin, avoiding the ranch and everyone in it. She told herself she was done, that she had tried to help and been rejected, and there was no point in subjecting herself to more humiliation. She told herself she did not care what happened to Boone or his ranch or his impossible debts. She told herself a great many lies, and none of them helped. On the 4th day, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Mary Harlow standing on her step, a basket in her hands and a determined look on her face. Mary was one of the few people in Copper Ridge who had ever been kind to Brena, a widow in her 50s who ran the general store and did not give a damn what anyone thought of her. "You look terrible," Mary said bluntly. "Thank you," Brena said. She did not invite Mary in, but the older woman pushed past her anyway, setting the basket on the table. "I brought soup," Mary said, "and bread. You are going to eat, and then you are going to tell me what happened between you and Boone Zarrow." "There is nothing to tell," Brena said. "Nonsense," Mary said. She ladled soup into a bowl and shoved it across the table. "The whole town is talking about how you have not been to the ranch in days, and Boone has been walking around like someone kicked his dog. So unless you both decided to have a breakdown at the same time by sheer coincidence, something happened." Brena sat down heavily and stared at the soup. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "I thought I was helping, but I only made things worse." Mary settled into the chair across from her, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "What kind of mistake?" Brena told her. "About the debt, about the payment, about Boone's reaction." Mary listened without interrupting, her expression growing more thoughtful as the story unfolded. When Brena finished, Mary let out a low whistle. "That man is an idiot," she said. Brena blinked. "What?" "Boone Zarrow," Mary clarified. "He is an idiot. You handed him a lifeline and he threw it back in your face because his pride could not handle the fact that a woman saved him. Typical." "It is not that simple," Brena said. "I should have asked him first." "I should not have." "You should not have had to ask," Mary interrupted. "If he had any sense, he would have told you about the debt from the start and asked for your help instead of trying to shoulder it all alone. But men like Boone, they would rather break than bend. It is their fatal flaw." "So what do I do?" Brena asked. She felt hollow, exhausted. "Do I go back? Do I apologize? Do I just walk away and let him figure it out on his own?" Mary leaned back in her chair, considering. "Do you love him?" Brena's breath caught. She had not said it out loud, had not even let herself think it in such plain terms. But there was no point in lying to Mary, who had probably seen through her months ago. "Yes," she whispered. "Then you fight for him," Mary said simply. "Not by forcing your help on him, but by showing him that you are not going anywhere, that he does not have to do this alone, that he is worth fighting for, even when he is being a stubborn fool." "What if he does not want me to?" Brena asked. "Then he is a bigger idiot than I thought," Mary said. "But somehow I do not think that is the case. I have seen the way he looks at you, girl. That man is halfway in love with you, even if he has not figured it out yet." Brena wanted to believe her, desperately. But the memory of Boone's anger, the way he had dismissed her as just a ranch hand, was too fresh. "I do not know if I can go back," she admitted. "Then do not go back for him," Mary said. "Go back for yourself, for the work you love, for the horses that need you. Go back because you are not the kind of woman who runs away when things get hard. And if Boone has any sense at all, he will realize what he nearly lost and do something about it." Brena looked at the older woman, at the fierce certainty in her eyes, and felt something shift inside her. Mary was right. She had spent her whole life letting other people's opinions and expectations dictate what she could and could not do. She had let the town's mockery convince her she was not worth loving, not worth fighting for. She had been so certain that Boone would reject her that she had not even considered the possibility that he might feel the same way she did. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to fight. "All right," Brena said. "I will go back." Mary smiled. "Good. Now eat your soup before it gets cold." Brena returned to the ranch the next morning, her stomach a tangle of nerves. She half expected Boone to turn her away, to tell her she was no longer welcome. But when she walked into the corral, he was there waiting for her, his face drawn and tired. "Miss Graystone," he said. He sounded relieved. "I was not sure you would come back." "I work here," Brena said. She kept her tone neutral, professional. "Unless you are firing me." "No," Boone said quickly. "No, I am not firing you, I just—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I owe you an apology. What I said the other day about you being just a ranch hand, that was not fair. You are far more than that, and I should never have implied otherwise." Brena's heart thudded hard in her chest. "What am I, then?" Boone met her eyes, and she saw something in them that took her breath away. "You are the reason this ranch is still standing," he said quietly. "You are the best thing that has happened to me since I came to this town, and I was an ass for making you feel like you did not matter." "You were," Brena agreed, "but I should have talked to you before going to the bank. I should have respected your wishes, even if I did not agree with them." "Maybe," Boone said. "Or maybe I should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth from the start." Maybe I should have let you help instead of trying to do everything myself." They stood in silence for a moment, the morning sun warm on their shoulders. Then Boone said, "I do not know how to do this, how to let people in, how to ask for help without feeling like I am failing." "You are not failing," Brenna said. "You are human. We all need help sometimes." "Even you?" Boone asked. Brenna thought of all the years she had spent alone, convinced she did not need anyone, that she was better off keeping the world at arm's length. She thought of the loneliness that had eaten at her, the nights she had lain awake wishing for something more. "Even me," she said. Boone smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Then maybe we can help each other." "Maybe we can," Brenna said. And for the first time in days, she felt the tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. They worked together through the autumn and into winter, training horses and selling them at prices that astonished the buyers who came from all over the territory. Brenna's reputation spread, and with it came offers from ranchers and breeders who wanted her to work with their animals. She turned them all down. The Zarrow ranch was where she belonged, and she was not going anywhere. Boone, for his part, began to let her in. He showed her the ledgers, walked her through the finances, admitted when he was worried or uncertain. It was hard for him. She could see that, the way his jaw would tighten and his shoulders would hunch whenever he had to confess a setback. But he did it anyway, and slowly, painfully, he learned to trust that she would not judge him for his struggles. They grew closer in other ways too. Small things at first. The way Boone would bring her coffee in the mornings, made exactly the way she liked it even though she had never told him. The way Brenna would leave wildflowers on his porch, tiny bursts of color in the gray winter landscape. The way they would stand together at the fence in the evenings, watching the sun set, not speaking but content in each other's presence. The town noticed. Of course they did. Copper Ridge was too small for anything to go unnoticed, and the sight of the spinster orc and the handsome rancher working side by side was fodder for endless gossip. Some of it was cruel, whispers about what a man like Boone was doing wasting his time on a woman like Brenna. But some of it was kinder, grudging admiration for the way she had turned the ranch around, speculation about whether there might be something more between them than just business. Brenna tried not to listen to any of it. She had spent too many years caring what other people thought, letting their opinions shape her life. She was done with that. If the town wanted to talk, let them talk. She had more important things to worry about. Like the fact that she was falling deeper in love with Boone Zarrow every single day, and she had no idea if he felt the same. The answer came in February, on a bitterly cold morning when the wind cut like a knife, and the ground was frozen solid. Brenna was in the barn grooming one of the mares when Boone appeared in the doorway. He looked nervous, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his breath misting in the frigid air. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. "Of course," Brenna said. She set down the brush and turned to face him, her pulse quickening. Boone stepped into the barn and closed the door behind him, shutting out the wind. For a moment he just stood there, looking at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her feel like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "I have been thinking," he said finally, "about the ranch, about the future, about what happens when we pay off the debt and things settle down." "All right," Brenna said carefully. She did not know where this was going, but her heart was beating so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "I have been thinking," Boone continued, "that I do not want to do this alone anymore, not just the work but all of it, the planning, the decisions, the risk. I want a partner, someone who has as much stake in this place as I do." Brenna's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Boone took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I am saying that I want you to be that partner, Brenna, not just in the ranch but in everything. I want to build a life with you if you will have me." The world seemed to stop. Brenna stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You want to build a life with me," she repeated slowly. "An orc woman that the whole town mocks. A spinster they say is too strange and too old to be worth anyone's time." "I want to build a life with the woman who saved my ranch," Boone said. "The woman who is braver and stronger and kinder than anyone I have ever met. The woman I have been in love with for months, even though I was too much of a coward to say it." Brenna's eyes filled with tears. "You love me?" "Yes," Boone said. He reached out and took her hands, his grip warm and steady. "I love you, Brenna Graystone. I love the way you talk to the horses, the way you never give up even when things are hard, the way you see the good in people even when they do not deserve it. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you are worth everything. If you will let me." Brenna could not speak. The words were caught in her throat, tangled up with the sob that wanted to break free. So instead, she stepped forward and kissed him, pouring every ounce of longing and hope and love she had been carrying for so long into that single moment. Boone kissed her back like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, his arms coming around her and pulling her close. They stood there in the cold barn, wrapped in each other, and Brenna felt something inside her chest crack open and spill light into all the dark places she had kept hidden. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathless, Boone rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes," Brenna whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The debt was paid in full by the end of March, a week before the deadline. The final payment came from the sale of a string of horses that Brenna had trained over the winter. Animals so well-mannered and responsive that the buyer paid double the asking price without hesitation. Boone and Brenna walked into the bank together, set the money on Gerald Pritchard's desk, and walked out free and clear. The relief was overwhelming. Boone actually laughed as they stepped into the street, a sound of pure joy that made Brenna's heart soar. "We did it," he said, grabbing her and spinning her around. "We actually did it." "We did," Brenna agreed, grinning so wide her face hurt. "Now what?" "Now," Boone said, setting her down and taking her hands, "we start planning the rest of our lives." They were married in the spring. A simple ceremony held on the ranch with Mary Harlow as witness and the pastor from town officiating. Brenna wore a dress that Mary had helped her sew, soft blue fabric that made her green skin glow. And Boone wore his best suit and looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The town turned out in surprising numbers, curiosity overcoming prejudice, and if there were still whispers and sidelong glances, Brenna found she did not care. She had Boone and the ranch, and a future that stretched out bright and full of promise. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch thrived under their joint management, Brenna's skill with horses and Boone's head for business making them one of the most successful operations in the territory. They expanded the pastures, built a new barn, hired a small crew of hands who treated Brenna with the respect she had earned. The town's attitude shifted too, slowly but surely, as people saw that the orc woman and the rancher were not just surviving but flourishing. Children who had once pointed and whispered began to wave when Brenna rode past. Women who had pitied her began to ask her advice on handling difficult animals. It was not acceptance, not entirely, but it was closer than she had ever thought possible. Their daughter, Winona, was born 2 years after the wedding, a squalling, green-skinned baby with her mother's tusks and her father's eyes. Boone cried the first time he held her, overwhelmed with love and wonder, and Brenna thought her heart might burst from the sheer happiness of it. Winona grew into a bright, curious child who followed her mother everywhere, learning to gentle horses before she could properly raid. She had Brenna's patience and Boone's determination, a combination that meant she was utterly fearless and occasionally exhausting. Their son, Silas, arrived 3 years later, a sturdy boy with human features and his mother's pointed ears. He was quieter than his sister, thoughtful and observant, with a gift for understanding animals that rivaled Brenna's own. The two children were inseparable, partners in mischief and adventure, and watching them play in the yard filled Brenna with a contentment she had never imagined possible. The ranch became a place of laughter and life, the kind of home Brenna had dreamed of but never believed she would have. There were hard days, of course. Seasons when the weather was bad or the market was slow, illnesses and injuries and the 100 small crises that came with running a working ranch. But they faced them together, Boone and Brena, and every challenge only made them stronger. On a warm summer evening, 10 years after Brena had first stepped into the corral and tamed the black stallion, the ranch held its annual horse sale. It had become a tradition, a day when buyers from across the territory gathered to bid on the animals that Brena had trained. And this year, the turnout was bigger than ever. The yard was filled with wagons and horses, the air buzzing with conversation, and the scent of roasting meat from the celebration that would follow the auction. Brena stood at the fence, watching as Boone led a beautiful chestnut mare into the sale ring. The bidding was fierce, prices climbing higher and higher, and when the final hammer fell, the crowd broke into applause. Boone caught her eye across the yard and grinned, and Brena felt the same flutter of warmth she had felt that very first day. Winona tugged on her sleeve, her face flushed with excitement. "Mama, did you see? That mare sold for $300. "I saw," Brena said, ruffling her daughter's dark hair. "Your father is very good at his job." "You are better," Winona said loyally. "You are the one who trains them." "We are a team," Brena said. "We both do our part." Silas appeared at her other side, quieter but no less excited. "Papa says after the sale we can have pie. Is that true?" "It is true," Brena confirmed. "Mary brought 3 so you can have as much as you like." The children whooped and ran off to find their friends, leaving Brena alone at the fence. She watched the crowd, the mingling of buyers and ranchers, the easy laughter and friendly haggling. She saw familiar faces, people who had once looked at her with suspicion or pity, but now greeted her with respect. She saw the ranch, thriving and strong, a testament to everything she and Boone had built together. And she saw Boone making his way through the crowd toward her, his smile bright and his eyes full of love. He reached her and slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Good day," he said. "Very good day," Brena agreed. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "Hard to believe this is the same place that was falling apart 10 years ago." "Hard to believe you ever doubted we could save it," Boone said. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You were always the one with faith." "I had faith in you," Brena said. "Even when you were being impossible," Boone laughed. "Fair enough. And I had faith in you even when I was too stubborn to admit I needed you." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. The sale was winding down, the crowd beginning to disperse, families loading wagons and saying their goodbyes. Soon it would just be them and the ranch hands, cleaning up and settling the animals for the night. Then there would be pie and music, the celebration that marked the end of another successful season. "You ever think about that first day?" Boone asked suddenly. "When you walked into the corral and tamed that black stallion?" "Sometimes," Brena said. She remembered the fear and the hope, the way her hands had shaken as she took the rope from Boone. "I was so scared you would send me away." "I was too busy being amazed to even think about sending you away," Boone said. "You were the most extraordinary thing I had ever seen. You still are." Brenna felt her throat tighten with emotion. Even after all these years, he still had the power to make her feel like she was something special. "I love you," she said. "I love you too," Boone said. He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "Thank you for not giving up on me, on us. On this. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did," Brenna said. "For loving me when I thought I was unlovable." "You were never unlovable," Boone said fiercely. "You were just waiting for the right person to see you, and I am the luckiest man alive that I got to be that person." Brenna kissed him then, slow and sweet, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into the touch. When they pulled apart, the sun had set, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Come on," Boone said, taking her hand. "Let us go get some pie before the children eat it all." They walked back toward the house together, hand in hand, and Brenna thought about the girl she had been 10 years ago. The lonely, mocked spinster who had believed she would always be alone. That girl would never have imagined this life, this happiness. She would never have believed that love and acceptance and a place to belong were possible. But they were. And Brenna had fought for them, claimed them, built them with her own 2 hands and the help of a man who loved her for exactly who she was. The ranch was theirs. The future was theirs. And as they stepped into the warm glow of the house, the sound of their children's laughter ringing out, Brenna knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had come home.